What's going on, guys? Cody McBroom here with Tailored Coaching Method. Today we are going to do a Q&A. These are all questions sent in from Instagram. Today is going to be strictly fitness and nutrition related. So the first question we have here is from Paige.Weirman. How does fat consumption exactly affect female hormones, and which ones? And do you have to increase the percentage of fat when in a deficit to keep your grams in a healthy range? So this is a multifaceted question, and it's really hard to answer because a lot of times we think of fats as this hormonal precursor, which they are. They are a nutrient of the macronutrients that's gonna have the biggest effect on our hormones compared to carbs and protein. But we can't leave those macronutrients in the dust, because if you lack protein, you're gonna have issues too. If you lack carbohydrates, you're gonna have hormonal issues as well, specifically things with like your thyroid. When we have too little of fat and we start seeing these hormonal declines, it's really hard to pinpoint which hormone is taking the biggest hit, especially with females, because to be honest with you, it's kind of like an umbrella. All of your hormones, the entire endocrine system tends to take a hit, but it's not necessarily only because of low fats. There is a minimum threshold we need for fats, but it's much lower than people really understand. What really happens is when you're in too big of a calorie deficit and or have lost too much body fat, that's when we start seeing hormonal issues. A good example of this is a contest prep physique athlete. Gets extremely shredded for show. Obviously, there are some hormonal consequences that come along with that. During the reverse process, they reverse so slowly that they stay that lean. And even if they get their calories, their carbs, their fats, everything up to a place that would theoretically be healthy for hormones, they still don't see biofeedback improvements. Why is that? Well, it's because they reverse so slow that they never put on any more body fat. And hormonally speaking, we need some body fat on our body, especially females. This is why typically a lean female is never as low of body fat percentage as a male would be at his leanest level. So which hormones do they affect? Testosterone, estrogen, thyroid, like the list goes on, metabolism. Your carbohydrate intake is going to affect these to a small extent as well, specifically your thyroid and your metabolism. However, we have to remember that it's mainly due to a calorie deficit. I have had clients and followers reach out to me who have gone on a maintenance or a surplus at levels of fat that would be below what I would recommend for hormonal health. However, their blood work is perfectly fine. Why is that? It's because they're not in a calorie deficit. They are not losing fat. They're at maintenance, they're in a surplus, they're building muscle. They're eating enough total calories to support those hormones. The best way to look at this is as your calories get lower, your fat becomes more important to stay high. So what I try to do is tell people, find your minimum range. Usually for men, it's between 0.35 to 0.4. For women, it's usually between 0.4 to 0.45. So it's a very small range, but that typically is the minimum amount you need, 0.35 times your body weight in fat. If you can keep it there during a deficit, you should be fine. But if you get into a deficit, I don't care if you go keto, if you raise your fats to 100 grams, you are never going to fully support your hormones while you're in a deficit. Part of a deficit is stressful and it gets you to a lower body fat level. So if you're in a serious aggressive cut, it's just part of what comes along with the journey. Next question we have from Fit Mom of 5 Journey. Well done. 6-month bulk plus 3-month cut versus 9 months maintenance, pushing overload and dialed in on everything. So I think this is a recomp goal. So if we take a 9-month period and we want to recomp, we want to build muscle and lose fat, what is the best approach? Should we bulk for 6 months and then follow that with an aggressive 3-month cut? Or should we stay at maintenance for 9 months and focus on dialing everything in, crossing our T's, dotting our I's, making sure we are 100% precise with everything we do and train really hard with overload? I would probably go with the beginning. Now, it really depends on your psychological state. So if somebody is very, very fearful of gaining body fat or they have body dysmorphia, I probably would lean on the maintenance, because if you stay at maintenance for 9 months, you're not gonna gain an excessive amount of fat. You might build muscle, really arguably, it just kind of depends on how advanced you are as a lifter. The more advanced you are, the harder it is to build muscle, therefore, the more likely you're gonna need a surplus during that building phase. And the more advanced you are, the more likely you're gonna need a deficit for the cutting phase. So recomp gets harder and harder as we get more and more experienced as lifters. But in a bulking fashion or even a gaining fashion, even if you're doing it in the right way and you're staying pretty lean, if the scale is going up and you have psychological issues when it comes to body dysmorphia, the scale, fat, weight, weighing yourself in general, so on and so forth, dieting, it might be an issue to go through a bulking phase because it can really mess with your head. So I might recommend that maintenance period. But if we're talking from a scientific and theoretical perspective where there is no psychological issues with the person that I'm working with, I'm gonna go with the 6-month bulk followed by a 3-month cut. I still would practice lean gaining approaches, because if I'm training really hard and I'm in a 100 calorie surplus versus a 200 calorie surplus, there's not gonna be that much of a difference in muscle growth, maybe in weight gain because you will put on more fat, but the minimum surplus is usually the recommended surplus because you can only build so much muscle, physiologically speaking, and that comes from training. You can only apply so much stress and recover from so much stress from training to cause that growth. I don't care if you eat 1,000 extra calories or 100, you won't grow without the training, and you don't always need that extra 1,000 or even 500 calories to recover from that. You might just need 150. So a lot of times people can get away with more of a lean bulk without realizing that they can go pretty far without gaining fat, which is why I would choose that route, because a lot of people, especially women, are surprised with how lean we can stay while building muscle if we do the surplus in a right way and we put training in the right place from a program design perspective. I would then follow that 6-month bulk or lean gaining phase with 3 months of cutting. This probably would be a more aggressive approach to that cut because I'd rather not drag that cut on longer than 12 weeks. Let's get it done in 12 weeks and then move back to maintenance and then eventually go to another bulk. But the thing I want to leave you with as well is 6 months is kind of putting a box or a ceiling on top of you, right? It's limiting how far you can go. Rather than saying I'm going to bulk for 6 months, I would say I'm going to gain until gain stops slowing down, until I'm ready to cut. That could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 12 months. I did this personally and I ended up bulking for 10 months because I felt really good. I kept progressing in training and I kept building muscle. Why would I stop that if it is going so well? It wasn't until I decided that I'm truly at a plateau, it's been long enough away from a deficit that I was ready to enter the deficit. So although I would choose the first option of 6-month bulking, 3 months cutting versus 9 months at maintenance, trying to make sure everything is crystal perfect in your diet, in your training, in your sleep, in your stress to make sure that you make the most gains you can while maintaining calorie intake, I would also recommend not putting a specific timeline on either of those phases, specifically the bulking phase, because a lot of times it can take longer than you would think, and you should give that and embrace that long journey because you're gonna get more out of it. The last question we have today is from Sonia Rosario 5 from Instagram. How many pounds should someone gain while trying to add more muscle before next cut for a show? So it's obviously a bikini or a figure competitor, and she's wondering in her off season, before the cut comes, how much muscle should she gain? How much weight should she gain? And the truth is there's no black and white answer to this question. It depends, it's so individual. Somebody who has been training for 5 years is gonna have a completely different rate of gain than somebody who's been training for 1 year, versus somebody who's been training for 6 years but has been training the wrong way or not dieting properly that entire time. I would still treat them as a beginner. It depends on so many factors of your life, of your stress, of your genetics, of so many different variables. So my recommendation, again, just like the last question, is not to put a specific number on it. You shouldn't focus on gaining 1 pound per month as a female, even though that is a really good rate of gain. You should more so focus on just continually progressing. There's gonna be months where you gain 2 pounds. There's gonna be months where you gain 1/2 pound. There's gonna be months where you gain 1 pound. It's never linear. You can't pinpoint exactly what the rate of gain should be. All we know is that it should be minimal and it should be consistent. So a lot of times what I tell people is you should probably gain 0.5 to 1% of your total body weight per month. Now that seems like a pretty slow process, but if we're focusing on lean gains and we are a natural athlete, that's more realistic when it comes to staying healthy, staying lean, and building pure muscle. Now, if you are a male who wants to just gain as much as possible and then cut back down later and do a real full bulk, you can push that 1% up to 1.5, 2%, even 2.5%, depending on how much your total body weight is right now and your experience. But as you can see, there's a bunch of stipulations with every single percentage I give because it depends. There's no way of knowing exactly how much you should gain. What I would advise is get yourself into a surplus so you see the scale going up. Even if it's just 1/4 pound per week, maybe even 1/4 pound every other week. If you are gaining and you are feeling good, you are gaining muscle. Training is the most important thing and patience overall. So if you do that, you're gonna gain muscle, not that much fat, and you're not gonna have to worry or obsess about exactly how much weight you should be gaining and putting a cap on any journey that you are going through. All right, guys, that is the 3 questions. If you wanna send me your questions, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Cody.boomboom. That's where I take in all these questions and I answer them on IG and on here on YouTube. If you like this video, give it a like, give me a comment if you have any other questions for me, and make sure you subscribe to the channel.